Otherwise, on a research station orbiting a dead star, Dr. Yoonji Han shut down her laboratory. She had been working here for 6 years, studying stellar phenomena alongside scientists from 11 different species. The work had been fascinating. She had published 27 papers, made discoveries that advanced everyone's understanding of the universe. But orders were orders. All human researchers were coming home. You cannot leave now, her colleague Ixler said. The Methane Collective member floated in his containment suit, his gaseous body swirling with agitation. We are so close to understanding the gravitational anomaly. The calculations require your expertise. Then you'll have to finish without me, Yangji said, packing her equipment. Or you could ask your government to reconsider its position. Oh, my government. I am a scientist, not a politician. So am I. But sometimes scientists have to make political choices. She sealed the last container. I've left my preliminary data in the shared files. It's not complete, but it might help. Ixler made a sound like wind through a broken pipe. Sadness, Yunji had learned. The council was foolish. I said this when I heard about the negotiation failure. Humans contribute more to galactic science than any species in the past century. Now we lose all of that because of pride and greed. Maybe that's a lesson worth learning, Yunji said softly. She placed her hand against Ixler's containment suit, as close to a gesture of friendship as their biologies allowed. If the council changes, truly changes, perhaps humans will return, but not under the old terms. Never under those terms again. Back on Earth, President Soman Bey watched the reports coming in from across human space. Every day brought new confirmations. Human colonies had stopped exporting to council markets. Human entertainers had canceled their tours of alien worlds. Human teachers had left their positions at interspecies universities. The economic impact is already showing, her chief advisor said, displaying holographic charts. 17 council species are experiencing food supply disruptions. The entertainment industry in the core worlds is struggling. Their research output has dropped by 30%. And on our side, Salman asked. Minor disruptions only. We anticipated this. Our colonies are self-sufficient. We stockpiled critical supplies before initiating Operation Silence. We're actually running a surplus in most sectors because we're not exporting anymore. Salman nodded slowly. She had known this would work. Humans had always been careful, always planned for contingencies. While the Council saw humanity as dependent clients, humans had been quietly building independence. What about the response from the Council? Public statements claim everything is fine. They say humanity's withdrawal is temporary and insignificant. But we're intercepting private communications. There's panic behind closed doors. 3 species have attempted to establish secret contact with us. Which species? The Yolan Accord, the Tertian Collective, and surprisingly, a faction within the Methane Collective. They're asking if we would negotiate separately, outside the Council framework. Soman considered this. No. If we start making separate deals, we undermine the entire point. The Council's power comes from forcing everyone to negotiate through their system. We break that system by refusing to engage with it at all, in any form. Understood. Madame President. On a small agricultural world called Haven's Rest, Farmer Minho Song watched the last alien transport ship depart. The colony had been selling grain too for nearby alien worlds. Good business, steady income. Now that was done. His neighbor approached across the field. Think we did the right thing, Minho? Don't know if it's right, Minho said honestly, but it's necessary. My grandfather used to say, you can't build a good house on a bad foundation. The Council was a bad foundation. Maybe now we can build something better. In the depths of galactic network space, something strange was happening. An alien student named Corvell, studying communication theory at a university in the core worlds, was writing a post. He had been monitoring human cultural channels for a research project. Those channels had gone dark. Where did all the humans go? He typed, 3 months ago, humans were everywhere. Human music played in our entertainment centers. Human philosophers debated on our discussion forums. Human scientists published more papers than anyone except the in theory. Now there's just silence. The The galaxy feels emptier somehow. Like when you lose a friend and don't realize how much space they've filled in your life until they're gone. The post went viral, spreading across the galactic network faster than Corvell expected. Thousands of responses came in. Some mocked humans for being sensitive, but many more echoed his sentiment. Students who missed their human teachers, musicians who missed human collaboration, scientists who missed human insights. The council noticed this too. In their private chambers, they began to worry. They had expected humans to come crawling back within weeks, desperate to restore their trading relationships. Instead, humans had vanished. And worse, others were starting to miss them. Speaker Veltris called an emergency session. We must address the human situation before it becomes a crisis. It already is a crisis, said a representative from the Yolan Accord. My worlds are experiencing food shortages. Our people are asking why we drove away the species that kept us fed. The humans will return, Veltris insisted. They need us more than we need them. But even as he said it, he felt uncertainty. The reports crossing his desk told a different story. Human colonies were thriving. Human trade ships were operating in independent sectors outside council space. Humans were publishing scientific papers again, but only on closed human networks, not in the shared galactic databases. Humanity had not collapsed without the council. They had adapted. And every day they stayed silent. The cracks in the council's foundation grew wider. Ambassador Jiho Park sat in his office on Earth, reading these same reports. Nari entered, carrying more data. Psychological warfare is working, she said. The council expected resistance. They expected negotiation. They didn't expect to be ignored. It's driving them crazy, Jiho smiled. My father taught me something when I was young. He said the opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. The council can handle species that fight them. They can't handle a species that simply doesn't care about them anymore. How long do we maintain silence? Until they understand. Until they're ready to meet us as equals, not as children to be controlled. Jiho looked out his window at Earth below. Or until we find a better alternative. Whichever comes first. 6 months after the walkout, the situation had moved beyond uncomfortable into genuine crisis. The Galactic Council chamber, once filled with confident voices debating minor matters, now hosted emergency sessions every week. Admiral Minho Kong walked through the military shipyard orbiting Mars. Around him, construction crews worked on vessels that would have shocked the Council if they could see them. The ships looked similar to standard human defense frigates from the outside, but their interiors held secrets humanity had been developing for years. Status report, Minho said to his chief engineer. The new shield generators are operational on 40% of the fleet. The improved FTL drives are installed on all capital ships. Weapon systems are outperforming projections by 15%. Minho nodded. These weapons, these improvements, they had existed in prototype form for years. But the Council had strict regulations about military technology. They monitored everyone, ensuring no single species could threaten the established order. Humans had complied publicly while researching privately. Now, with no Council oversight, they could deploy everything. And the weapons platforms around the outer colonies? Fully operational, Admiral. Any hostile force entering human space will face defenses they've never encountered before. This was part of humanity's calculation. Leave the Council, yes, but be ready for what might come next. The galaxy was not a peaceful place. There were aggressive species, pirates, raiders. The Council's peacekeeping forces had provided some protection. Now humans would protect themselves. Across the galaxy, the Turkan hegemony was learning this lesson firsthand. The Turkan were aggressive expansionists who had been held in check by Council forces for decades. With the Council weakened and distracted by the human situation, the Turkan saw opportunity. Their fleet moved into the neutral buffer zone between Council space and independent territories. 3 small colonies fell within days. The Turkan expected the Council's rapid response force to intervene, as they always had before. But the response force didn't come. On Earth, Director Young Ji-han of Intelligence Services read the reports with grim satisfaction. The Council's peacekeeping capability is collapsing. How is that possible? Asked her deputy. They have hundreds of ships. They have ships. But we trained most of their tactical officers. We provided the logistics software that coordinates their operations. We developed the communication protocols that let different species work together effectively. We didn't take that technology with us, but we stopped maintaining it. Stopped training their people. Stopped answering their technical questions. They didn't realize how dependent they were. No one ever does, until it's gone. Yoonji pulled up another report. We're also getting messages from TH. The ship pulled away from the station and jumped to FTL in a flash of twisted space. Behind them, the Council scrambled to understand what had just happened. Ahead of them, humanity prepared for what came next. 3 months had passed since the walkout, and the galaxy was starting to notice the absence. Not all at once like a sudden explosion, more like a slow leak, steady and unstoppable. Draining something vital from the galactic community, Captain Do-Yan Lee stood on the bridge of his merchant ship, the Morning Star. He had been trading with alien worlds for 15 years, carrying everything from Earth fruits to manufactured goods across Council space. His ship was one of 300 human commercial vessels that had operated in this sector alone. Now it was heading home. All cargo transferred to storage? He asked his first officer. Yes, Captain. The station master tried to negotiate. Offered us triple rates to stay. Do-Yan smiled without humor. I'm sure he did. He looked at the view screen showing the alien station they were leaving. Dozens of ships were docked there, but the human berths stood empty now. That station gets 40% of its food from human agricultural worlds. They'll be rationing in 2 months. The communications officer spoke up. Captain, we're receiving the final check-in from the last human merchant in this sector. Captain Borisong on the Eastern Wind. She's pulling out of the Tertian system. Acknowledged. Transmit the rendezvous coordinates. We jumped together in 30 minutes. This was happening all across Council space. Human traders, human workers, human contractors, all withdrawing in coordinated waves. The Council had thought humans needed them, needed access to their markets and their resources. They were learning more Council species. Quiet requests to open dialogue. They see what's happening, and they want out before it gets worse. President Soman Bay received these reports in her morning briefing. The news was better than she had hoped. The Council was fracturing, but she knew humanity couldn't appear too eager. We maintain our position. No negotiations with Council members, individually or collectively. They need to understand that the old system is dead. Some of these species are genuinely suffering, Madam President. The Yolan Accord, for instance. They've always been fair to us. Then they should leave the Council and join us in building something new. But we don't reward species for staying in a corrupt system just because they were slightly less corrupt than the others. On the trading station Celestial Gate, Captain Yuna-O watched the chaos from her ship docked at the periphery. The station had been a hub of galactic commerce for 300 years. Now it was struggling. Human traders weren't just merchants. They had been the backbone of logistics across this entire sector. They knew the best routes, the fastest shipping lanes, the most efficient loading procedures. The aliens were trying to replicate these networks, but efficiency had dropped by 40%. Ships sat waiting for cargo for days instead of hours. Prices were rising as transportation costs soared. Yuna could see alien merchants arguing at the docking master's station. Tempers were running high. Goods were spoiling in warehouses. The whole delicate system of galactic trade was showing how much it had relied on human participation. Captain, we're receiving another offer, her communications officer said. Station Master is willing to pay premium rates if we'll stay and help reorganize their logistics. Politely decline, Yuna said. Remind them that we're no longer operating in Council space. She felt some guilt about this. Not all aliens were like Veltris. Many were just ordinary people trying to live their lives. But sometimes, big changes required everyone to feel some pain. Maybe then they would demand better from their leaders. Back in the Council chamber, that pain was becoming impossible to ignore. Speaker Veltris stood before the assembly, and for the first time in his career he looked uncertain. The situation requires immediate action, he announced. The human absence has created disruptions across multiple sectors. Trade, research, security, we must bring them back to the negotiating table. On what terms? Demanded the Yolan representative. We drove them away with our arrogance. Why would they return? We can offer concessions, reduce the price of medical supplies, grant them some technology access, some concessions. The Yolan representative stood, his crystalline body refracting the chamber lights. Half measures created this problem. The Council has operated like a protection racket for centuries. We control resources. We set prices. We force younger species to accept our terms or face isolation. The humans called our bluff and walked away. Now we're seeing the truth. They were holding up more of this structure than we ever admitted. Other voices joined in. Species that had been quiet for years suddenly found courage to speak. The human example had shown them that the Council could be defied, that there were alternatives to submission. Veltris tried to restore order, but the debate raged for hours. Finally, a representative from the Methane Collective proposed a solution. Send a formal delegation to Earth. Offer to renegotiate all terms. Show them we are willing to treat them as equals. The vote passed, but barely. Many council members still believed humans would eventually capitulate. They would learn otherwise. The delegation departed 3 days later, carrying formal proposals and drafted treaties. They arrived at Earth's orbital stations confident they would be welcomed. Instead, they were met with polite but absolute refusal. Ambassador Jiho Park delivered the message personally via video link. He didn't even invite them down to the surface. "Thank you for traveling this distance," he said. "But humanity's position has not changed. We are not interested in reforming the Council. We are building alternatives to it." "You cannot simply abandon centuries of galactic cooperation," the delegation leader protested. "We're not abandoning cooperation. We're abandoning a system that was never about cooperation. It was about control." Jiho's expression remained pleasant but firm. If individual species wish to establish direct relationships with humanity outside the Council framework, we are open to discussion, but we will never again negotiate through the Council. The delegation returned to Council space with this message. It hit like a bomb. Individual negotiations meant the end of the Council's collective bargaining power. It meant species could choose to work with humans directly, bypassing the Council entirely. Within days, 2 species formally announced their withdrawal from the Council. They cited the human example and the Council's failure to adapt. More were considering it. Admiral Minho Kong watched these developments from his command center. "It's working faster than we projected." "The Council was more fragile than they appeared," said his tactical officer. "All those centuries of accumulated resentment, just waiting for someone to show there was another way." "We showed them," Minho agreed. "Now we need to be ready for what comes next. Not all species will accept change peacefully. Some will fight to preserve the old order." He was right to worry. Deep in Council space, a coalition of hardline species was forming. They saw the fracturing of the Council as an existential threat. They would not let it happen without a fight. The galaxy was changing. And change was never peaceful. 9 months into the silence, humanity revealed what they had been doing while the galaxy watched and worried. The announcement came not with fanfare or threats, but with a simple transmission broadcast across all frequencies. Dr. Seojin Park stood in a chamber unlike any human facility. The walls seemed to shift and flow, made of materials that didn't match any known technology. Behind him, tall figures stood in the shadows, their forms ancient and patient. "People of the galaxy," Seojin began. "Humanity wishes to introduce you to our new partners. The Remnant Collective has agreed to work with us in establishing a new framework for interstellar cooperation." The transmission showed the Remnant then, and those watching across the galaxy felt a collective shock. The Remnant were legends, myths from the oldest records. A civilization that had reached the stars when most current species were still primitive. They had withdrawn from galactic affairs millennia ago, watching from the edges of known space. "The Remnant have been observing the current galactic order for centuries," Seojin continued. "They have seen the corruption and exploitation that defines the Council. They waited for a species that would reject this system, that would choose dignity over convenience. Humanity has proven to be that species. In the council chamber, panic spread like fire. Speaker Veltris watched the transmission with growing horror. The remnant possessed technology beyond anyone's understanding. Their knowledge spanned epochs. If humanity had their support, the balance of power had shifted catastrophically. "This is a trick," Veltris said, but his voice lacked conviction. The remnant abandoned the galaxy long ago. They would not return now. The evidence was clear. Human ships were now seen traveling through sectors previously thought impossible to navigate. They used jump points that shouldn't exist. The remnant's ancient knowledge was opening doors humanity could never have accessed alone. Commander Giwan Shin led the first joint patrol through one of these previously restricted zones. Her ship, the Defiant Hope, carried both human crew and remnant advisors. They entered a sector the Council had marked as off-limits for 300 years. The conference room stretched wider than most human buildings. 47 different species filled the chamber, each delegation sitting in their specially designed seats. Some breathed oxygen like humans. Others sat in tanks of methane or floated in gravity fields. The air smelled strange, a mixture of chemicals that made the environmental systems work for everyone. Jiho Park sat at the human table, his hands folded on the smooth metal surface. He had been an ambassador for 12 years. He had negotiated trade deals, settled disputes, and built bridges between Earth and dozens of alien worlds. But today felt different. Today felt like an ending. Next to him sat Hyeon Kim, wearing the dark blue uniform of Earth's Military Advisory Corps. Hyun rarely spoke during these meetings, but his presence reminded everyone that humanity could defend itself if needed. On Jiho's other side, Nari Choi reviewed data on her tablet. She handled cultural matters, making sure humans understood alien customs and aliens understood human ways. At the head of the chamber, Speaker Veltris addressed the council. The Anthony leader stood 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and skin that shimmered like oil on water. His voice came through the translation devices everyone wore, turning his clicking language into words each species could understand. "The human delegation continues to waste our time," Veltris said. His tone carried the weight of someone who believed he could not be challenged. "They demand rights they have not earned. They ask for respect they do not deserve." Humanity joined this council only 200 years ago. Many of us have been here for thousands of years. Jiho kept his face calm, but inside he felt anger building. This was the 3rd week of negotiations. 3 weeks of the same arguments, the same dismissals, same contempt. The council wanted something simple: humanity's faster-than-light drive technology. The human FTL drive was better than anything the aliens had. It was faster, used less energy, and could jump farther. In exchange, the council offered medical supplies. Basic medical supplies that humans needed for colonies on the frontier. But Jiho knew the truth. The council controlled access to the rare elements needed for those medicines. They had mines on dozens of worlds. They could flood the market and lower prices anytime they wanted. Instead, they kept supplies limited and prices high. They used medicine as leverage to control younger species. "We are not asking for special treatment," Jiho said, standing up slowly. "We are asking for fair trade. Our FTL technology took us 50 years to develop. It represents the work of thousands of scientists. You want us to give it away for supplies that should cost a fraction of what you charge?" A council member from the Methane Collective made a sound like grinding rocks. The translator rendered it as laughter. "The arrogance of humans never ceases to amaze. You think your little engine is worth so much? Perhaps you should return to your home system if our terms displease you." Other council members made sounds of agreement. Veltris raised one of his 4 hands, calling for silence. "The human ambassador will learn that the council's patience has limits. We have made our offer. It is generous, considering humanity's status. Accept or reject, but stop wasting our time with endless debate." Jiho looked at Hyun. The military advisor gave a small nod. They had discussed this possibility many times over the past weeks. They had sent messages back to Earth, encrypted communications that outlined the situation. President Soman Bey had given them clear instructions. If the council would not negotiate in good faith, humanity would take a different path. Very well, Jiho said quietly. Humanity rejects the council's terms. Veltris made a dismissive gesture with two of his hands. Then we are done here. You may leave. We will, Jiho said. But not just this negotiation. Humanity is withdrawing from all council proceedings, effective immediately. The chamber fell silent. Even the background hum of the environmental system seemed to fade. Delegates who had been working on other matters looked up. Veltris's skin changed color, darkening to something like bruised purple. You cannot simply withdraw, the speaker said. His voice had lost some of its confidence. There are procedures. There are treaties. You have obligations. We have reviewed our agreements carefully, Nari said, standing up next to Jiho. Nothing requires us to participate in a body that treats us with such disrespect. Nothing forces us to negotiate with partners who argue in bad faith. We are not leaving the galaxy, speaker. We are leaving this council. Yoon stood as well, his movement precise and military. He reached up and removed his translation device, placing it on the table with a soft click. Jiho did the same. Nari followed. Around the chamber, the other human delegates did likewise. 23 humans removing their translators in perfect synchronization. What are you doing? Demanded a council member from the Yolan species. We cannot understand you without translators. Jiho smiled, but there was no warmth in it. That is no longer our problem. He spoke in Korean, knowing none of them could understand. The alien languages that had filled his ears for weeks suddenly meant nothing. The power of communication flowed one way now, that it no longer flowed toward the council. The human delegation walked toward the exit. Their footsteps echoed in the shocked silence. No one tried to stop them. The council members simply stared, unable to process what had just happened. In 200 years of human membership, nothing like this had occurred. Species complained. Species argued. But no one left. As they reached the corridor outside, Nari allowed herself to show emotion. Her hands were shaking slightly. They will try to punish us for this. Let them try, Hyun said. His voice was steady and cold. They wanted to see what happens when humans stop talking. They wanted to treat us like children who would accept any terms just to belong. Now they will learn what we do instead. Jiho walked toward the docking bay where their ship waited. Behind them, he could hear the council chamber erupting into chaos. Voices overlapping, the translation systems, struggling to keep up with 47 species all trying to speak at once. The sound faded as they moved deeper into the station. Their ship was small, but fast, filled with human technology that the council had wanted so desperately. As they boarded, Jiho took one last look at the massive station that housed the Galactic Council. It hung in space like a small moon, powered by technology from 100 worlds, home to thousands of diplomats and workers. Set course for Earth, he told the pilot. Maximum speed, and send a message to all human vessels and colonies. Operation Silence has begun. Sensor readings coming in, her science officer reported. Multiple planetary bodies. Abundant resources. Habitable worlds. This entire system is rich with everything the council claimed was scarce. Guan smiled grimly. Record everything. We'll be sharing this data with everyone who wants to see it. The revelation spread quickly. The council's restricted zones were not dangerous. They were treasure troves the council had been hoarding for centuries. They had lied about scarcity to maintain control over resource distribution. They had kept entire systems hidden to drive up prices and force dependence. Species across the galaxy reacted with outrage. Protests erupted on dozens of worlds. Citizens demanded answers from their council representatives. How long had they been deceived? What else had the council hidden? On Earth, engineer Temin Song completed his most ambitious project. The Quantum Relay Network was a communication system that operated on principles the Remnant had shared with humanity. It allowed instant communication across vast distances without using council infrastructure. Final test successful, Temin reported to the Oversight Committee. We can now offer secure, independent communications to any species that wants to bypass council networks. Within a week, 37 species requested access to the network. They were tired of the Council monitoring their communications, tired of paying fees for basic connectivity. The human alternative was faster, more secure, and offered freely to any species that wanted to establish direct diplomatic relations with humanity. This was the key to humanity's strategy. They weren't trying to dominate the galaxy. They were offering an alternative. Species could choose to stay with the Council, or they could choose to work with humanity and the Remnant Collective in building something new. The Yolan Accord was the first major power to make the choice. Ambassador Keth addressed his people in a broadcast that was watched across Council space. For 200 years, the Yolan Accord has been part of the Galactic Council, Keth said. His crystalline form refracted light as he spoke, creating patterns that conveyed emotion to his species. We believed in the Council's promise of unity and mutual benefit, but we have been deceived. The Council has hoarded resources while our colonies struggled. They have restricted technology while claiming to promote advancement. The humans showed us the truth. They showed us that we do not have to accept this system. Paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Effective immediately, the Yolan Accord withdraws from the Galactic Council. We will instead seek partnership with humanity and the Remnant Collective in creating a new galactic framework. One based on genuine cooperation rather than exploitation. The announcement sent shockwaves through Council space. The Yolan were not a minor species. They controlled 12-star systems and had significant economic and military power. Their departure was a massive blow to the Council's credibility. Other species quickly followed. The Tertian Collective announced their withdrawal. The Free Worlds Alliance declared independence from Council oversight. Within 2 weeks, 7 major powers had left the Council, taking dozens of minor species with them. Veltris tried to hold the line. He gave speeches about unity and tradition. He warned of chaos and disorder if the Council collapsed. But his words rang hollow now. The species leaving were not descending into chaos. They were thriving. Human agricultural worlds were now trading directly with former Council species, offering fair prices without middlemen. Human technology was being shared, not hoarded. The Remnant Collective was teaching willing species how to use ancient jump points and navigate previously inaccessible regions of space. Director Yonji Han monitored the intelligence reports with satisfaction. The cascade is accelerating. We're receiving applications from 40 new species wanting to join what they're calling the Concordat. The what? Asked President Soman Bey. The Galactic Concordat. It's what the species working with us are calling this new alliance. Not a council with central authority, but a concordat of equals. Each species maintains sovereignty, but cooperates on mutual interests. Soman considered this. It's a good name. Better than anything we would have chosen. Let them name it. Let them feel ownership of this new system. Back in Council space, the hardliners were preparing their response. A coalition of 12 species, led by the Anthony Empire, refused to accept the changing order. They saw the Council's collapse as a threat to their power and prosperity. They had benefited most from the old system, and they would fight to preserve it. Their war fleet assembled in secret, preparing to strike at human colonies. They believed that if they could show humanity as vulnerable, other species would lose faith in the new order. They would return to the Council for protection. Admiral Minho Kong received warning of the fleet's movement from Remnant intelligence. Estimated force composition, he asked. 300 capital ships, 500 support vessels, significant firepower, and our readiness. The outer colonies are fully defended. New weapon systems are operational. We can hold them. Minho studied the tactical displays. The hardliners were making a mistake. They still thought in terms of the old galaxy, where force determined outcomes. They didn't understand that the game had changed. Prepare defensive positions, but do not fire first. Let them commit to aggression. The galaxy is watching. The hardliner fleet jumped into the human frontier system of New Seattle, expecting to find lightly defended colonies. Instead, they found a defensive network that made their sensors scream warnings. Weapon platforms that shouldn't exist, shield generators beyond known technology. Human ships with capabilities that defied their understanding. The fleet commander hesitated. This was not what they had anticipated. They had expected easy targets. This looked like a trap. Before he could make a decision, remnant ships materialized around his fleet. Not attacking, just present. Their vessels dwarfed anything the hardliners had brought. Ancient and powerful, a reminder of what real military superiority looked like. A transmission came from the remnant flagship. You are not welcome here. Withdraw or face consequences that will end your civilization. The hardliner fleet withdrew. They had come to prove humanity was weak. Instead, they had proven how outmatched the old order truly was. News of the failed attack spread instantly. The hardliners had shown aggression and been turned away without a shot fired. The message was clear. The new order could defend itself. The council could no longer intimidate through force. Ambassador Jiho Park watched the reports with quiet satisfaction. 9 months ago, we walked away from a negotiation. Now we're reshaping the galaxy. Was it worth the risk? Nari asked. Jiho thought about this. Every step was a risk. Every choice could have failed. But sometimes you have to risk everything to change anything. The council had centuries to reform itself. It chose comfort over justice. Now it faces the consequences. 1 year after the walkout, Ambassador Jiho Park returned to the council chamber. But he was not there to negotiate. He was there to witness an ending. The chamber looked the same physically. The same vast space, the same specialized seating for different species. But the atmosphere had changed completely. Where once there had been 47 delegations, now only 23 remained. Empty seats marked the departure of species that had chosen a different path. The vote was a formality at this point. Everyone knew what was coming. Still, protocol demanded it be recorded officially. Speaker Veltris stood at his podium, but he no longer commanded the room. His skin had lost its shimmer, turning dull gray. The confidence that had once defined him was gone, replaced by the hollow look of someone watching everything they built crumble. The motion before us, he said quietly, is the formal dissolution of the Galactic Council. All in favor? 23 hands, claws, tentacles, and appendages rose in agreement. Not a single voice opposed. Then it is done. Veltris looked around the chamber one last time. The Galactic Council, which has governed interstellar relations for 7,000 years, is hereby dissolved. The chamber fell silent. No cheers, no protests. Just the quiet acknowledgement that an era had ended. Jiho watched from the gallery reserved for observers. Beside him sat Han and Nari, the same team that had walked out of this chamber a year ago. The difference was striking. Then they had been alone in their defiance. Now they represented a coalition of 57 species working together under a new framework. After the session ended, Veltris approached Jiho in the corridor. The former speaker looked tired and old. You destroyed everything. No, Jiho replied calmly. We refused to participate in something broken. What happened after was your choice, not ours. We could have negotiated. We could have found compromise. You had 200 years to treat us fairly. You had a year after we left to make real changes. You did neither. You clung to power and control until everything collapsed around you. Jiho's expression held no satisfaction, only wariness. I take no joy in this, Veltris, but I don't regret it either. The former speaker walked away without another word. Later that day, Jiho learned that Veltris was being called to trial by his own people. The Antheri population had turned against their leadership. They blamed the council's arrogance for their current isolation and economic troubles. Veltris and his supporters would face justice from their own species. The next day, Chancellor Hound Choi presided over the first official session of the Galactic Concordat. Unlike the council's hierarchical structure, the Concordat had no permanent leadership. The chancellor position rotated yearly among member species. This year, humanity had been chosen to organize the transition. But next year it would be the Yolan Accord's turn. We gather today not as subjects and rulers, Hound said, addressing the assembled delegations, but as equals. Each species here maintains its sovereignty. We are not creating a government. We are creating a framework for cooperation. The Remnant Collective sent observers but did not seek membership. They were advisors and teachers, not participants. They had made clear that the younger species needed to build their own future. The Remnant would provide knowledge and protection, but the decisions belonged to those who would live with the consequences. One of those decisions involved the former Council territories. The hoarded resources, the hidden systems, the wealth accumulated through centuries of exploitation. What happened to all of that? The Concordat proposes open access, Hound announced. The restricted zones will be open to all member species. Resources will be distributed based on need and capability, not political leverage. Former council members who join the Concordat will receive aid in transitioning to this new system. This was deliberately generous. The Concordat could have punished the former council species, could have kept them excluded and struggling. Instead, they offered a path to redemption. Join the new system, accept its principles, and receive support. It was a lesson in how power should be used. Not everyone accepted the offer. Some council remnant species tried to maintain independence, holding on to their accumulated wealth and power. They formed their own smaller alliance, bitter and isolated. Humanity and the Concordat let them. There would be no forced participation, no coercion. Those who wanted to remain in the old ways could do so, as long as they respected the sovereignty of others, Captain. Una-O piloted one of the first merchant vessels through the newly opened territories. Her ship carried a mixed cargo from 3 different species, all working together in a trade network that would have been impossible under the council system. First jump in 3 minutes, her navigator announced. We're using the remnant navigation data. This route will cut to weeks off the usual journey. Ayuna smiled. This was what she had hoped for. Not dominance, not revenge. Just the freedom to trade fairly, to travel efficiently, to do business without layers of bureaucratic control and exploitation. Dr. Seogen Park sat in his laboratory on Earth, preparing the latest batch of research for publication. But unlike the old days, when human research was shared through council databases, this would go to the Concordat's Open Science Network. Any species could access it. Any scientist could build on it. No restrictions, no controlled access, no using knowledge as leverage. The papers are ready for release, his assistant said, including the FTL improvements and the medical synthesizer designs. Release everything, Seogen confirmed. Science should never have been a bargaining chip. Within days, the impact was visible. Species that had been denied advanced technology for decades suddenly had access. Colonies that had struggled with medical supply shortages could now produce their own medicines. The galaxy entered a new renaissance of scientific advancement. No longer held back by artificial restrictions, Admiral Min-Ho Kong oversaw the integration of former Council peacekeeping forces into the Concordat's defense structure. Many of the peacekeepers had become disillusioned with the Council's corruption. They welcomed the chance to serve a more just cause. Training protocols are working well, his chief of staff reported. The mixed species units are adapting to human tactical doctrine. Good. But remind everyone that we're not imposing our methods. We're teaching principles. Protect the weak. Punish aggression against peaceful species. Question authority when it becomes corrupt. Min-Ho looked out at the fleet assembling in orbit. The Council's mistake was believing that military power exists to serve the powerful. We're teaching them it exists to serve justice. On Earth, President Soman Bay prepared for her final address on the matter. A year had passed since the walkout. The galaxy had transformed. Now, it was time to reflect on what humanity had learned and what message they wanted to send forward. People of Earth, people of the Concordat, people of the galaxy, she began. 1 year ago, humanity made a difficult choice. We walked away from the existing galactic order. Many questioned our decision. Some called us foolish. Others said we were arrogant. A few understood that we simply refused to accept a system built on exploitation. She paused, letting her words resonate. What happened next proved that we were not alone in our frustration. Dozens of species had been waiting for someone to show that the Council could be challenged. There were alternatives to submission. We did not lead a revolution. We simply opened a door and let others choose whether to walk through. Around the galaxy, beings of countless species watched her address. The Concordat is not perfect. It will face challenges. There will be disagreements and difficulties. But it is built on better principles than what came before. Equality instead of hierarchy. Cooperation instead of coercion. Justice instead of exploitation. Summon's expression grew serious. To those species that remain outside the Concordat, we hold no grudges. Your choice is your own. But understand this. Humanity will never again participate in a system that treats any species as lesser. We will be partners, never subjects. We will offer friendship, never servitude. That is our promise to ourselves and to the galaxy, young Corval. The alien student who had first questioned humanity's disappearance was now studying at the Human University on Mars. He was writing his final thesis for his degree in interstellar relations. His conclusion read, "Humanity's greatest weapon was never their technology or their military strength. It was their willingness to walk away from a poisoned table and build a better one. The old council could not survive that revolution because it was built on the assumption that species would always choose comfort over principles. Humanity proved that assumption wrong. In doing so, they showed the entire galaxy that change was possible." He submitted his thesis and walked out into the Martian evening. The terraforming was still in progress, but already the sky showed hints of blue among the red. Change was slow, but it was happening. Just like it had happened in the galaxy, above Mars construction crews worked on the new Concordat headquarters. It would be a station accessible to all member species, rotating through different sectors so no single region dominated. A symbol of the new order, mobile, inclusive, answerable to all. Ambassador Jiho Park stood on the observation deck of that growing station, watching the construction. Nari joined him. "Do you think it will last?" she asked. "Nothing lasts forever," Jiho said. "Eventually, the Concordat will face its own challenges. Maybe it will reform and adapt. Maybe something better will replace it. But for now, it's better than what came before. That's enough." Anne arrived with news. "Just received word. The last 3 council remnant species have requested admission to the Concordat. They're ready to accept the terms." Aho nodded slowly. "Then it's truly over. The council is gone. Not just dissolved, but replaced. The galaxy has moved on." He thought back to that day in the council chamber 1 year ago. The moment they removed their translation devices and walked out in silence, it had seemed like such a small gesture then. Just refusing to continue a conversation that was going nowhere, but sometimes the smallest gestures carried the largest meanings. Sometimes silence spoke louder than any argument. Sometimes walking away from power was the most powerful thing you could do. The galaxy had learned that lesson. Humanity had taught it. And the future, uncertain as it was, looked brighter than it had in centuries. Below them, ships from dozens of species came and went. Trading freely, communicating openly, working together, not because they were forced to, but because they chose to. That choice, that freedom, was worth everything they had risked. The old order had fallen. The new order was rising. And humanity, having sparked the change, was content to be one voice among many in the chorus of a transformed galaxy.